In the last video, we added a detail widget that appears when we hover over a slot. In this video, we will add a notification widget so that our player actually knows when he picked up an item. So let's get started. First off, go inside of your widgets folder and create another widget blueprint. That will be our obtained item widget. Open it up and change the setting to desired on screen. Then we will delete the canvas panel and start with a size box. For the width and height, I figured out that 410 by 110 pixel works fine. If you want to use other values, feel free to do that. Then on top of our size box, we will add a border. And for that border, we will first remove the padding and change the alpha to 0 so it's completely invisible. We will use that border later when we do some animation stuff. Then on top of the border, add another border. And now that will be our background. Also remove the padding here. Then let's get the brush color and change that to black with an alpha of 0.5. On top of that border, we will add a vertical box. And in that vertical box, we will start with another border that will cover up the top part of our obtained item widget. For that border, remove the padding again and give it a brush color of a really bright bluish color with an alpha of 0.3. Then we will search for a text and add that on top of our border. That text will be our obtained text, so call it obtained text, and make it a variable. For the text, type in obtained and align it to the center. Change the font size to something like 22, and let's get the shadow color here and make that opaque. Also, we will change the shadow offset to 2 pixel by 2 pixel, and you can see that much better now. Alright, that's it for our obtained text. Now we will get a horizontal box, add that on top of our vertical box, and set that horizontal box to fill. Give it a padding of 5 pixels from the top, just so there is a bit of space in between. Then on top of our horizontal box, we will start with a text, which will show our amount. So that will be the amount text. Make that a variable as well. You can give that some padding from the left. Something like 10 pixels should work. And close that. It will be aligned to the left and vertically aligned to the center. For the default text, you could type in something like x99, just so we can see how it looks. Also give it padding of 10 to the right. Then lower the font size, 22 or 23. And that's it for our amount text. After that, we want to see the icon of our item, so add a size box to the horizontal box. Check the width and height override and type in something like 70 pixel by 70. Set that to horizontally align left and align center. Then get an image, add that on top of our size box, and that is our icon. Now we also need the name of the icon, so search for another text, add that on top of our horizontal box. That will be our name text. Make that a variable as well. Align that to the left and vertically to the center. Also give that a padding of 10 pixels from the left. We can decrease the font size to something like 19 and change the type to regular. For the default text, you could type in something like health potion. Alright, that's it for our design. Now we also want to add some animation so that it looks like it flies in and flies out. So click the plus icon here to add an animation. That will be called our blend in. Double click on the animation and we can expand our timeline here. Now that's where we need the first border we added, because with that content color here, We expand that, and now we change the alpha. You see that the alpha of the whole widget changes and not just of one text or one icon. So we will use that. And we will also use the transform under translation to slide that in. Okay, set that to 0. And now at time 0, 0, we will add a keyframe for the translation and set the translation to something like -450, just so you can't see it. Then hit the add keyframe again so it saves. Also scroll up and we will add our content color and opacity. Type in 0 for the alpha and hit the add keyframe button. So now you can't see our widget. Then get the slider in the timeline and go to something like after 0.4 seconds our animation will be finished. So then we will change the alpha to 1 and hit the keyframe and go down to the translation. For the X translation, type in 0 and hit the keyframe. So now when we play our animation, you can see that it slides in. Compile that and save. What you will also have to do is to close the widget once and reopen it. And now you can see that our widget is visible again, but we don't want that. So grab the border, content color and opacity, set it to 0, and the translation to -450. Compile and save that. Now we also want to add another animation that will be our blend out. Double click to open that up. And when our animation begins, we want to add a keyframe for the content color, but this time it will start with an alpha of 1. So type in 1 and hit the keyframe button. Also for the translation, it will start with a translation of 0 and X. Then we will move the timeline slider here to 0.4 seconds. This time for the translation, type in +450 and hit the keyframe button. For the content color and opacity, for the alpha here, type in 0 and hit the keyframe button. Now we can play that and we see that it slides out to the right. Now compile and save that. When we close it and reopen it, you can see that it's set off here. So grab the border again, set the content color and opacity to 0, that should be fine, and translation to -150. Now compile and save, and that's it for our animations. Let's go to the graph now and create some variables we will need. The first one will be the item class that notification is created for. So change the variable type to master item class, make it editable and expose on spawn. Then we also need the amount. Make that an integer, also editable and expose on spawn. Further, we want to control the time during which our notification widget will be visible with a variable. So create another one that will be our visible duration and change the variable type to a float. Make that editable and expose on spawn. And for the last one, we will need a reference to our main widget. Change that variable type to main widget reference, also editable and expose on spawn. Now on event construct, we first want to get our icon, set the brush from texture, and the texture we will get from our item class. Search for get class defaults, get the item info, break that, and connect the icon here. Then we will get the name text, set text, and the in text will be our name. Connect the execution wires here. After that, get the amount text, set text, and for the in text we can get our amount, make that a string. Then right click and search for append, string append. For A, type in X. For B, connect the amount to string, and the return value will go in our string. Now what is also common for most games that you can see a difference between rare items and usual items. So we will also change the color of our text according to our category. And to do that, we will get the amount text copy that over, get the name text, copy that over, and you can also get the obtained text. Then off of one of that, search for set color and opacity. For the in color and opacity, search for make slate color. And then off of the category, search for select. The return value will go to our specified color, and now we can choose different colors for our different categories. For example, you could go for the consumables and just make that white. Equipment could be something like red. Quest items you can make bright yellow, and readables something like blue. And you also want to go back to the set color and opacity node. For the target, also connect the name text and the amount text, so all three of them will be changed at the same time. So after we set the icons and our texts, we will play the animation. So under your variables you will see the blend in animation. Drag that in, and off of it drag and search for play animation. Target will be ourselves. Now we want to wait until our animation has finished, and what you could do is just search for a delay node and plug in 0.4 seconds, because we specified that for our animation length. But what I like to do is get the blend in and search for end time, and of the return value search for a delay node. So that way when we later come in and change our blend in animation and maybe also extend it, we don't have to come in here again and change the delay node. After that delay, you want to go in another delay for our visible duration. You could also add the end time to the visible duration and only have one delay node. After that delay, grab in the blend out animation, and we will play that. Also get the end time of the blend out animation and add a delay again. So now when that has finished, we will just set the visibility of ourselves to hidden. Alright, that's it for our obtained item graph. Compile and save. Now we also have to put that inside of our main widget somehow. So open up the main widget, and in here we will just search for a border, add that to the canvas panel. That border will be our obtained item border, and make sure it's a variable. Then we can anchor it to the top center here. Change the position in X to -205. So the half of our obtained item widget's width. And position in Y could be something like 100. Then you will also have to make sure that it's size to content, so we will only be able to see it when there is something added to it. Clear the padding. And for the brush color, give it an alpha of 0, because we don't want to see the border, we only want to see what is inside of it. Now let's go to the graph, to the event graph, and in here we will need new variables as well. First one will be the visible duration for our obtained items. Make that a float, editable and expose on spawn. And the next variable will be our obtained items queue. For the variable type, choose s_inventory slot. And make that an array. Inside this array we will save all the items that still need a notification, and then we will show the notification for them one by one. Now let's compile and save. Add a function. The first one will be called add item to obtained queue. It will have an input, which will be the item class. Change the variable type to master item class, and also we will need the amount. that an integer. Now, first off, we want to get our obtained items queue and get the length, so the amount of items inside our queue, and check whether that is greater than 0. So, is there anything in our items queue? If there already is something in our queue, we will just get the obtained items queue and add to it. And for the item we will add, you want to split the struct pin here, drag over the item class, drag over the amount, connect that to the true, and we return after that. If there isn't anything in our queue, we also want to add it to the obtained items queue. But after that, we also create a widget, and that will be our obtained. Oh, just noticed I misspelled that. So rename that to obtained item. So right click, search for create widget, search for our obtained item, connect that. Item class will come from our input, amount will come from our input, the visibility duration will be our visible duration, and the main widget will be ourselves. After we created that, we also want to get our obtained item border and add child, and the content will be the return value. So after we added it to the queue, we will create a widget for that, add that to the border, and it will play the blend in animation and will blend out afterwards. So after add child, we return. Then we also need a second function that is called onObtainMessageEnd. So after we displayed our notification, that function will be called, and in here we will get the obtained items queue and remove an index. We will just remove the first item of our queue because that was handled already then. After that, get the obtained item border and clear it. So remove the widget that is in there. Then get the obtained items queue, get the length, and check whether it's greater than 0 again. Then of the condition, search for branch. Now if it isn't greater than 0, so when there's nothing left in our queue, we just return. However, if there is something left in our queue, we want to show the next notification. So we will create a widget. Class will be our obtained item class. And now we want to get from our obtained items queue at index 0, so the first item, break that struct. The item class will go into the item class here, amount to the amount, the visible duration comes from our visible duration, and the main widget selves again. After that, get the obtained item border and add child. Content will be the return value, and then you can search for return node. Alright, that's it for our two functions. Now we also have to make sure that we actually call that onObtainMessageEnd. So go to our obtained item, and when we finish playing our blend out animation, after we set the visibility, get the main widget and search for onObtainMessageEnd. Compile and save. Now we also have to make sure that every time we actually add an item, our notification will be shown. So for that, go inside of your inventory system folder under blueprints in our BP inventory. And first we will go to the event graph, to our event begin play. Now because we exposed our visible duration, we can promote that to a variable here. Call that obtained visible duration, and make that editable and expose on spawn. Also add another variable that will be called show obtained message question mark, and that will be a boolean, also editable and expose on spawn. Compile and save. And right here, after we added our main widget to the viewport, we will get the show obtained message and search for a branch. So if we want to show our obtained message, we don't want to do anything, but if we don't want to show them, we can get our main widget, copy that here, and search for the obtained item border, and since we don't need it, we can remove it from parent then. Then let's add a function called show obtained item that will have two inputs. First, the item class, bp scoremaster item class, and also the amount, which will be an integer. Now we actually need an output as well. That will be our success boolean. And now when we want to show an obtained item, get the boolean we just created, show obtained message, search for branch, connect that. If we don't want to show our obtained messages, just go directly into a return node and leave that as false. However, if we want to show an obtained message, we want to check whether our main widget is valid. If it isn't valid, go to the return node with false. If it is valid, off of the main widget, drag and search for add item to obtained queue. Item class comes from our input and amount from our input. Connect that to the is valid, and after that we return successful. Compile and save. Now the problem is that we want to call our show obtained item function every time we add an item. However, currently our add item function calls itself again, so we can't add that in there, because otherwise it will be called multiple times at once, and we don't want that to happen. So what you can do is right click on the add item function and duplicate that, call that add item, and maybe in brackets internal, so that will only be used inside of our inventory actor. To ensure that, you can get the access specifier here and change that to private. Compile and save. And in our actual add item function, that is public, you can delete everything we did. And now we want to get our show obtained message, search for a branch. If we don't want to show our obtained message, we can just call our add item internal function, connect the item class to the item class, amount to the amount, and after that we return. Also make sure that you add the same outputs that we have in our internal function, so a boolean for success and rest, that is an integer. Compile, save, connect the success to the success and the rest to the rest. So when we don't want to show an obtained message, we just call the internal function and return the return values of our internal function. So we did everything we did before. But if we want to show an obtained message, also call the add item internal, connect the class to the item class and the amount to the amount. Then off of the success, search for branch. And if we weren't successful, so of the false path, we return with false and the rest from our internal call here. However, if we edit the item, we will show the obtained item. Item class comes from our input, and the amount will be the amount from our input minus the rest that could not be added. So connect that here, connect that to the amount, and after that return with true and the rest from the add item internal function. Now we can compile and save. Also make sure that in your add item internal function, every time you call the add item function again, you call the add item internal function, connect the success to the success of the return node and the rest here. Remove the old add item function, connect the execution. Item class will be the local class, amount will be the local amount. Then let's go to the other path where we call that function. For example, here we want to search for add item internal, remove that here, connect the local class to the item class, and get the local amount minus the maximum stack size to connect that here. Also plug in success for the return success and rest for the return rest. Now for the fourth path, when an item cannot be stacked, and yeah, right here we call that function again. We want to call the internal function, move the other one. Item class will be local class, amount, local amount minus 1, connect the true to it, connect it to the return node, the success to the return node, and the rest to the return node. Now we should be able to compile and save. And before we can playtest, make sure that you go to the top-down BP, where you actually spawn our inventory actor on begin play, and check the show obtained message. For the visible duration, we could plug in something like 1 second to test. Also, before we can test, go to the blueprints under item classes in the BP pickup actor. Because we changed that add item function, we have to connect the success to the condition again, and the rest to the greater than 0 check, and also the rest to the amount. Now compile and save, and now we should be ready to test. Let's get our health potion here. You can see you obtain 50 health potions. Also work those 50. Then you see that the color changes for our map, because we specified that. And here for our ring, you can see that it was in yellow color. Alright, that's it for this video. In the next one we will create our hotkey bar. See you then.